The caracal lies pressed against the ground body, aligned with the faint rise of sand and stone. Muscles hold tension without trembling. Breathing is shallow, measured, barely present. Ahead, the prey moves slowly, unaware, framed against the emptiness of the desert. There is no cover left to borrow from the land. No shadow deep enough to hide the approach. Only timing. Everything suggests this moment should already be over. The wind favors the hunter. Sound carries away, not toward. No larger predators move nearby. No circling shapes darken the sky. The prey's attention drifts its head, turning just long enough to open a narrow window, one the caracal has learned to recognize since youth. Instinct tightens the body. This is where the desert usually decides. This is where hesitation costs survival. But the caracal does not move. Seconds stretch longer than they should. The tension does not release into motion. The muscles remain locked, coiled, waiting past the point where waiting makes sense. The opening closes. The prey lifts its head. The window seals without disturbance. The opportunity passes unnoticed by everyone, except the hunter that refused it. The caracal lowers its head slightly, ears still angled forward, listening. There is no alarm, no explosion of movement across the sand. The desert remains quiet, indifferent. From a distance, nothing looks wrong, and yet something has broken the expected order. This animal has hunted before, successfully, repeatedly. Its body carries the efficiency of experience, lean strength shaped by necessity, scars earned and survived. It knows this terrain. It understands the cost of hunger and the danger of delay. Every part of it is built to respond instantly when the moment arrives. So why didn't it? The caracal withdraws, slowly reversing its path without sound. Each step retraces the approach with the same care that brought it here. No urgency follows the retreat. No frustration breaks the rhythm. The desert gives no sign that the moment mattered at all. But the cost has already begun to form. Hunger does not announce itself immediately. It accumulates quietly, sharpening over time. Energy reserves thin. Opportunities become fewer as the sun climbs and the land grows harsher. The decision not to strike does not end. When the prey walks away, it extends forward, reshaping the hours that follow. Some predators fail because they act too late. Others fail because they act too soon. This one failed because it did not act at all. As the caracal moves deeper into the open land, it remains unseen as it always has. But invisibility alone does not guarantee survival. In a place where every decision must be justified by outcome, restraint becomes a gamble. The desert does not punish mistakes immediately. It waits. It allows the consequences to unfold slowly, without drama, without warning. The caracal disappears into the landscape once more, carrying the weight of a choice that cannot be undone. What looked like caution may have been something else entirely, and whatever it was, the desert will test it. By the time the sun rises higher, the space where the caracal lay moments earlier has already been erased. Wind smooths the sand. Heat lifts scent from the ground. Nothing remains to suggest that a decision was made or avoided there at all. This is how survival hides its turning points. The caracal moves through the landscape with practiced restraint. Its gait is fluid but economical, conserving energy rather than displaying it. A faint scar traces along one shoulder, barely visible beneath short fur, pulling the movement ever so slightly out of symmetry. It does not slow the animus, but it shapes how effort is distributed. Every step carries awareness of limits learned the hard way. This is not an inexperienced hunter. It knows how close is too close. It knows how sound travels. It knows how quickly attention sharpens in open ground. Yet something has changed in the way it responds to opportunity. Instead of closing distance, it pauses longer than necessary. Instead of committing, it waits for certainty that never fully arrives. The desert, indifferent to nuance, offers no reassurance. It demands decisions without guarantees. The caracal's world has narrowed to margins, distance, timing, exposure. Each hunt now unfolds under the weight of previous outcomes. Success has not vanished, but it has become conditional, requiring alignment so precise that opportunities pass more often than they resolve. This raises a question the desert itself does not answer. Why does this caracal hesitate when instinct demands action? It is not fear in the simple sense. Fear is immediate reactive. It sends bodies fleeing from danger without calculation. What governs this restraint is slower, quieter, embedded. It appears only at the final threshold when the difference between survival and starvation is measured in seconds. The caracal has learned something most predators never articulate: being seen once can end everything. Exposure invites pursuit. Pursuit invites competition. Competition favors size, not subtlety. In this environment, survival has never depended on winning conflicts. It has depended on avoiding them entirely. But avoidance has a cost. Hunger accumulates regardless of caution. Territory shifts as competitors expand their ranges. Prey becomes less predictable as resources thin. The desert compresses options until restraint and risk begin to overlap. This caracal now lives inside that overlap. Each decision carries memory. Each movement weighs what happened before against what might happen next. The desert does not punish this immediately. It allows the pattern to develop, to reveal itself gradually through consequence rather than confrontation. This story is not about a hunt that succeeds or fails. It is about a pattern that has begun to form. If hesitation is a flaw, the desert will expose it. If it is an adaptation, the desert will test its limits. There may be no single moment that explains this change, no clear event that transformed instinct into restraint. Instead, the answer may lie in accumulation, in scars survived, pursuits escaped, and lessons learned where survival came at the cost of invisibility. As the caracal moves on, the land remains wide and open, offering nothing that resembles safety. The question follows without sound, without shape, embedded in every step that does not accelerate into motion. Is this hesitation the reason it has survived so long? Or is it the beginning of the end? Long before hesitation became a pattern, this caracal moved differently. Its early hunts followed instinct without delay. Distance closed quickly. Timing was decisive. In those days, restraint was unnecessary because experience had not yet carved limits into muscle and memory. The first change came quietly. It began with a hunt that unfolded too openly. The approach was clean, the conditions favorable. But the moment of impact stretched longer than expected. Dust lifted. Sound traveled farther than intended. And before the caracal could withdraw, the desert responded. Movement appeared at the edge of the open land. Then another. Then more. Larger predators do not need to see a hunt clearly. They only need to know where one occurred. Presence alone is enough to shift the balance. The caracal abandoned the kill before feeding was complete, retreating without confrontation. Survival was preserved, but something else was learned. Exposure lingers. That lesson returned again months later when the scarcity tightened the land. Prey clustered around shrinking resources. Opportunities narrowed. The caracal committed faster, needing success more than discretion. The strike landed, but withdrawal did not come cleanly. A sudden pursuit followed heavy, persistent, impossible to challenge directly. The chase did not last long. It did not need to. The caracal escaped by doing what it always did, vanishing into terrain too uneven and narrow for larger bodies to follow. But escape came with damage. A glancing blow, a twisted fall, pain that did not disappear when movement resumed. That wound healed. The scar remained. It altered balance just enough to matter. Not enough to cripple, enough to remind, enough to change how distance was judged and how risk was measured. From that moment forward, speed was no longer a guarantee. Withdrawal became conditional. The desert took note. There were other moments, smaller ones, failed approaches that ended in sudden exposure. Nights spent without feeding because movement elsewhere signaled danger. Days of rest forced by exhaustion rather than choice. Each event alone was survivable. Together they formed a pattern. Hesitation did not arrive as fear. It arrived as calculation. The caracal learned that the desert does not punish aggression immediately. It waits until aggression repeats. It allows patterns to become habits, then tests whether those habits still work when conditions shift. Over time, restraint began to replace instinct at the final threshold. The caracal still approached, still closed distance, still aligned timing. But the final commitment slowed. The strike waited for certainty that never fully arrived. This was not weakness. It was memory. Memory of exposure. Memory of pursuit. Memory of escape that came at a cost. The desert does not reward those who forget. But it does not guarantee survival to those who remember too much either. By the time hesitation became visible, it was already embedded. Not as a single decision, but as an accumulation of outcomes that reshaped behavior. The caracal did not choose this change. It adapted to it. Now, each hunt carries the weight of what happened before. Each opportunity is filtered through experience that favors invisibility over immediacy. What remains uncertain is whether this adaptation still fits the desert as it is becoming. There are no borders to warn where safety ends and exposure begins. No cover that can be trusted twice. What appears stable in the early hours becomes hostile by midday, and what feels empty at dusk may turn crowded by night. Survival here is governed less by strength than by timing, and timing shifts constantly. For a predator that relies on remaining unseen, the environment itself is the primary opponent. Sound behaves differently in open land. A single step on loose gravel can travel farther than expected. Wind masks noise in one direction and amplifies it in another. Scent does not linger. It disperses unpredictably, betraying presence or erasing it without pattern. Vision dominates everything. Anything that breaks the horizon risks becoming a signal. Prey species are shaped by this reality. They feed with heads high, bodies angled toward escape. Many gather in open ground, not because it is safe, but because danger can be detected early. The desert teaches vigilance through repetition. Those that fail to watch do not survive long enough to be cautious again. For the caracal, this creates a narrow operating window. Movement must happen when attention dips. Approach must align with distraction. Withdrawal must begin before presence is registered. There is no room for improvisation. The desert also compresses encounters. Resources draw multiple species into the same spaces, increasing the likelihood of overlap. Larger predators move through these areas with confidence born of size. They do not need stealth to succeed. Their presence alone alters behavior. Prey scatters. Smaller hunters retreat, scavengers gather at a distance. The caracal cannot compete in this arena. It does not challenge. It avoids. Its survival depends on recognizing these shifts early and removing itself before attention hardens into pursuit. Even time itself becomes an adversary. As heat builds, energy drains faster. As darkness falls, perception changes. Night does not provide concealment. It redistributes risk. Sounds carry farther. Movements echo. Eyes adjust quickly to contrast and motion. Every period demands a different calculation. The desert does not allow patterns to remain effective for long. What worked once becomes predictable. Predictability invites detection. Detection invites escalation. The environment forces adaptation, not through sudden catastrophe, but through gradual pressure that tightens margins until a single misstep is enough. For this caracal, hesitation has emerged within these constraints. It is not simply a behavioral shift. It is a response to an environment that punishes visibility more severely than hunger, until hunger itself becomes the greater threat. Here, survival is not about choosing the right action. It is about choosing the least irreversible one. The desert does not reward bravery. It does not punish caution immediately. It tests whether restraint can endure scarcity. As conditions continue to change, the space between invisibility and starvation narrows. The laws remain constant, but their consequences accelerate. And the caracal must decide again and again whether the rules it has learned still apply. The prey is isolated, drifting just far enough from the others to break the shared vigilance that usually protects it. Movement is slower than it should be. Attention wanders. The desert, for once, offers alignment instead of opposition. Distance closes. The caracal advances with familiar precision, body-low steps placed where sound dissolves into sand. Wind holds steady. No silhouettes rise at the edges of the land. No heavier footsteps cut across the quiet. Every condition that once defined a successful hunt is present. This is the kind of moment restraint was meant to protect. And yet it falters. The caracal pauses not at the edge of danger, but at the edge of certainty. The body tightens. Muscles prepare. The strike could happen now, clean and uncontested. But something delays it. Not fear, not distraction. Something slower, heavier. The prey shifts. The opening narrows. The caracal withdraws. It does not retreat far. It does not flee. It simply lets the moment pass, dissolving back into the land, as if the approach had never happened. From a distance, nothing looks wrong. The prey resumes movement, unaware that survival hinged on a hesitation it never saw. This is the anomaly. The desert does not create many easy opportunities. When it does, they are meant to be taken. Avoiding them carries a cost that accumulates quietly, but relentlessly. Hunger does not distinguish between wise restraint and unnecessary delay. The caracal moves on, invisible as ever, but the pattern has shifted. This is not the first hunt avoided. It is the first that offered no obvious reason to retreat. No competing presence, no environmental threat, no immediate risk, only the memory of risk. What emerges now is ambiguity. Is this hesitation a flaw experience calcifying into overcaution? Or is it a deeper strategy, one that favors long-term survival over short-term gain? The desert offers no feedback. It does not correct behavior through explanation. It allows patterns to continue until consequences become unavoidable. Each missed opportunity redraws the margin. Energy declines. Options compress. The space to choose restraint shrinks. For the first time, invisibility begins to feel insufficient on its own. This moment does not resolve the question. It sharpens it. The caracal remains unseen. The desert remains unchanged. But beneath the surface, a balance has tipped slightly out of alignment. What once protected survival now delays it. Whether this anomaly represents adaptation or error will not be decided by theory or instinct. It will be decided by what happens when the next opportunity does not arrive in time. Hours pass without success. Then days. Hunger tightens its grip, gradually dulling patience and sharpening urgency at the same time. The caracal's movements lengthen its roots, stretch farther from familiar ground. What was once a territory defined by avoidance becomes a landscape that must be crossed more often, more openly. Invisibility becomes harder to maintain. With fewer opportunities available, each decision gains weight. The caracal cannot afford to wait for alignment that may never come again. Yet the hesitation persists, not as a conscious refusal, but as a delay embedded at the final threshold of action. Each approach carries the memory of past exposure, past pursuit, past escape that came at a cost. Energy drains quietly. The caracal begins to move during less favorable conditions, venturing out when attention is higher and cover even scarcer. Prey reacts sooner now. Movements are sharper, more synchronized. The desert feels smaller, tighter, as if observation itself has intensified. Competition follows. Larger predators drift through the same spaces, drawn by the same scarcity. Their presence alters everything without effort. Prey tightens formation. Scavengers linger closer. The margin for withdrawal shrinks. Even remaining unseen requires more effort than before. The caracal avoids confrontation, as it always has. It yields ground. It detours. It waits. But waiting now carries its own danger. Hunger does not pause. It compounds. There are nights when movement replaces rest, when the caracal travels farther than it should, pushing through fatigue rather than conserving energy. Each step carries risk. Each sound risks attention. The desert begins to expose restraint as a vulnerability rather than a safeguard. This is the cost of the anomaly. What once protected survival now delays it. What once reduced exposure now forces prolonged movement. The strategy that favored invisibility begins to demand endurance it cannot guarantee. The caracal is not failing, it is being tested. The desert does not demand immediate answers. It pressures patterns until they either adapt or collapse. The caracal continues forward unseen but increasingly strained, navigating a narrowing path between starvation and exposure. Soon the choice will no longer be theoretical. The desert always reaches a point where restraint must either change or end. The caracal slows near a familiar stretch of land where movement once flowed predictably. Paths used by prey are still there, etched faintly into sand and stone. But something is missing. The spacing feels wrong. The rhythm has changed. Where vigilance once pulsed in loose patterns, attention now hardens into fixed points. Then the scent appears, not fresh, not strong, but deliberate. It does not belong to prey. It does not belong to the larger predators that pass through without concern. It is linear, repeating, pressed into the land with purpose. The caracal freezes not from fear, but from recognition. This is not a competitor. It is not a hunter that withdraws when unseen. It is something else. The ground carries marks that do not fade with wind. Shapes that do not follow hunger or avoidance. Objects placed where water draws movement. Edges altered in ways that do not benefit any animal that survives by stealth. The desert, usually indifferent to manipulation, has been touched and left changed. The caracal does not investigate closely. It does not need to. The implication alone reshapes the landscape. Prey behavior tightens further, clustering earlier, dispersing later. Paths that once offered approach angles now funnel movement into exposed corridors. Stillness becomes rarer. The desert feels watched in a way it never did before, not by instinct, but by intent. For the first time, invisibility does not guarantee safety. This is the shock. The hesitation that once protected the caracal may not be the anomaly. It may be the response. A behavior shaped not only by predators and prey, but by a presence that does not play by ecological rules. One that does not retreat when unseen. One that leaves traces meant to persist. If this presence grows, the caracal's strategy becomes fragile. Avoidance no longer means absence. Restraint no longer ensures anonymity. Waiting no longer resets the risk. The desert has changed in a way that patience cannot undo. The caracal adjusts immediately, not through aggression, but through recalibration. Roots bend away from altered ground. Movement compresses into narrower windows. The body lowers further, as if proximity to the land might compensate for what concealment no longer provides. But the pressure does not ease. This revelation reframes everything that came before. The missed opportunities. The prolonged hesitation. The instinct to withdraw even when conditions aligned. What looked like overcaution now reads differently, like early adaptation to a threat that did not yet fully exist, or perhaps a threat sensed before it could be seen. The desert offers no commentary. It does not explain the change. It does not acknowledge it. It simply continues altered and unaltered at the same time, testing every strategy against a new variable. The caracal moves on, unseen as ever. But invisibility now carries uncertainty. What cannot be detected may still be anticipated. What leaves no trace may still be accounted for. The central question shifts under this new weight. Was the hesitation a flaw learned from past exposure, or was it the only response capable of surviving what the desert was becoming? The answer will not arrive as clarity. It will arrive as consequence. As heat drains from the land, sound travels farther. Small movements echo across open ground, carried by air that no longer trembles with warmth. Shadows deepen, but they do not conceal. They sharpen contrast, turning motion into signal. Darkness does not hide presence, it amplifies it. The caracal moves when others pause. Its body stays low-pressed closer to the surface than before, as if proximity to the earth might absorb attention. Steps shorten, roots curve. Every path avoids the altered ground sensed earlier, even when that means crossing more exposed terrain. Hunger tightens, but it does not override caution. Not yet. This night stretches longer than most. Prey shifts unpredictably, responding not only to instinct, but to disruption layered onto the environment. Movement patterns fracture. Familiar routes dissolve. The caracal waits through long intervals of stillness, ears mapping the land in fragments, isolated sounds without rhythm motion, without pattern. Opportunities flicker, then disappear. Several times distance closes enough to feel decisive. Each time something interrupts alignment. A sudden sound, a shift in wind, a faint disturbance that does not belong to any animal moving through hunger alone. The caracal freezes, dissolving back into the darkness without pursuit. Energy drains quietly. This is the cost of extended restraint. Not dramatic failure, but erosion. Muscles tighten for action that never comes. Focus sharpens around moments that never resolve. The body carries readiness longer than it was built to sustain. The desert watches without judgment. Hours pass. The night cools further. Thirst presses alongside hunger, now complicating calculation. Movement becomes necessary not for opportunity, but for survival. The caracal travels farther than intended, threading through open corridors where invisibility must work harder than ever before. This is not a night of hunting. It is a night of endurance. At one point, the caracal stops completely. No movement, no adjustment. It remains still long enough for the land to forget it is there. This stillness is not waiting. It is preservation. Motion now risks attention more than reward. When movement resumes, it is deliberate and minimal. Roots shorten again. Exposure is accepted only when unavoidable. The caracal adapts not by forcing action, but by reducing presence even further, compressing itself into the margins the desert still allows. By the time the horizon lightens faintly, the night has taken its toll. No success, no failure, only depletion. The caracal survives the long night, not by changing its nature, but by pushing it to an extreme, existing almost entirely as absence. The strategy holds, but just barely. Dawn approaches without promise, and with it comes a moment when restraint and necessity can no longer coexist quietly. The light lifts slowly, revealing a landscape stripped of ambiguity. Heat will return soon. Attention will sharpen. Movement will become costly again. The night has taken more than it gave, and the margin left to negotiate survival is thin. The caracal moves anyway, not toward abundance, toward necessity. Ahead, prey gathers near, what little remains of reliability space shaped by scarcity rather than comfort. There is no perfect angle now, no alignment that promises success without consequence. Whatever happens next will expose something, whether hunger or presence. This is the threshold where restraint stops being strategy and becomes risk. The caracal advances with what remains. Distance closes faster than before, not through confidence, but through inevitability. Muscles tighten with fatigue layered beneath readiness. The scar along the shoulder pulls faintly, reminding the body of limits it cannot escape. The prey senses something not enough to flee, but enough to stiffen. Heads lift. Attention spreads. The opening is narrow, unstable, already collapsing. There is no time to wait for certainty. The strike comes not as perfection, but as decision. Movement breaks the stillness in a burst that carries sound and dust farther than intended. The approach is exposed. The outcome uncertain. For a moment, the desert holds its breath, not because it cares, but because consequence has finally arrived. The caracal commits fully. Whether the attempt succeeds or fails matters less than what it costs. Exposure draws response. Shapes move at the edge of awareness. The land reacts, compressing risk into seconds. Withdrawal follows immediately, not in triumph, but in preservation. The caracal disappears again, not cleanly, not invisibly, but fast enough. There is no clear victory here. No dominance claimed. No certainty restored. What remains is survival reduced, altered but intact. The desert does not mark this moment as special. It does not remember the choice. It only measures what remains afterward. The caracal moves on with less energy than before, but with a clarity that did not exist during hesitation. This was not the perfect decision. It was the only one left. Wind smooths the surface again. Heat begins its slow return. What unfolded at dawn leaves no monument behind, no sign that a line was crossed, no marker that a choice reshaped survival. The land resumes its indifference with practiced efficiency. The caracal moves on. Its pace is slower now, not from injury, but from expenditure. Energy has been traded for time. Presence has been risked to preserve existence. The balance that once favored invisibility alone has shifted into something narrower, more conditional. There is no sense of resolution here. The hunger is reduced, but not erased. The environment remains altered, carrying traces of intent that do not fade with weather or light. Prey continues to move differently. Attention remains tighter. The desert has not returned to what it was before. What has changed most is not the land, but the calculus. The hesitation that once governed action no longer operates unchecked. It has been tested against necessity and found incomplete on its own. Yet neither has aggression proven to be the answer. Exposure still invites consequences that cannot be survived repeatedly. The caracal now exists between these extremes. It does not abandon restraint. It does not embrace risk. It navigates the space where both are required, but neither is sufficient. This is not adaptation as improvement. It is adaptation as compromise. Across the seasons that follow, this pattern will repeat in quieter ways. Opportunities will appear and vanish. Scarcity will return. The environment will continue to change in increments too subtle to announce themselves. Each time, the caracal will respond not with certainty, but with adjustment. The desert does not care whether hesitation once saved this animal or nearly ended it. It does not track intent or reward learning. It only continues to apply pressure, reshaping survival through accumulation rather than judgment. For the caracal, survival will not depend on finding the perfect strategy. It will depend on recognizing when a strategy has stopped working, and knowing that recognition alone does not guarantee a better alternative. As the animal disappears once more into open land, it leaves behind no trace of conclusion, only continuity. Only the knowledge that in a place where nothing hides easily, survival belongs to what can change without being seen. The question remains unresolved because the desert never resolves anything. Was the hesitation the reason this caracal survived so long? Or was it the habit that nearly ended it? The land offers no answer. It only waits to see what happens next.